Tottenham Hotspur finally have a new manager. They have announced Thomas Frank, not unexpectedly, as the new manager of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. Let me tell you my story, guys, and why I'm doing a live at 9:30 a.m. on a Friday morning, when I've been telling you for basically 2 weeks how I will go live as soon as an announcement of our new manager comes through. It is because Tottenham Hotspur are the most maddening. I'm beginning to sound like Alistair Gold, because he always starts every video, doesn't he, with "Hello guys, Alistair Gold here," and he's always basically down on Tottenham Hotspur of a club and how maddening they are. But I cannot tell you how maddening it is that Tottenham Hotspur decided to announce officially Thomas Frank last night at like 8:15 p.m. on a Thursday night. I was out at a stand-up gig, and I'm just like, what are you doing? Why wouldn't you do it at like 9 a.m. on the Friday morning or 5 p.m. on the Thursday night? I'm getting a little bit into like the realities of making content here, because like 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. on a weeknight or first thing in the morning is when you're going to get most traction. But bizarrely, Tottenham decided to do it at 8:15 p.m. So I wasn't able to do a live video, and I apologize for that. But hopefully some of you have checked out. I made a little kind of 10-minute documentary all about Thomas Frank that I released last night. So hopefully you guys have been able to check that out. If you haven't, do watch it after this live show. Basically, I'm going to stay on live. I'm going to speak to you guys in the comments, go through all of the news. The Spurs official statement, just in case any of you haven't heard it, was this: "We are delighted to announce the appointment of Thomas Frank as our new head coach on a contract that runs until 2028. Thomas has extensive experience in English football, having joined Brentford in 2016, since becoming one of the longest-serving current managers in the Premier League. During his time at Brentford, he transformed the club, moving them up from the Championship to an established Premier League side, consistently and significantly outperforming expectations for an extended period of time. In Thomas, we are appointing one of the most progressive and innovative head coaches within the game. He has a proven track record in player and squad development, and we look forward to him leading the team as we prepare for the season ahead." And I'm going to talk in a second about the flip-flapping of Daniel Levy going from one extreme to the other. But in the absolute opposite extreme to Ange Postecoglou, who, when he came into the club, brought absolutely nobody with him. He doesn't travel with coaching staff, unlike Pochettino or Thomas Frank, because Thomas will be joined, as it says in the statement, from Brentford by Justin Cochran as the first-team assistant coach, Chris Haslam, head of performance and first-team assistant coach, and Joe Newton, first-team coach analyst. Why do I find it so hard to say analyst? Joe Newton, first-team coach analyst, with Andreas Georgeson as the first-team assistant coach, arriving from Manchester United. So that was the official statement released at 8:15 p.m. last night. I guess the reason it took so long was the haggling over the staff members. But frankly, I think Brentford have been pretty amenable, really. I mean, we've just completely wiped them of their first team coaching staff. And all the reports were that there was a little bit of haggling, particularly over Justin Cochran, who's the assistant coach, who also works in the England coaching setup, because there was some talk that Brentford might have wanted to appoint him as the replacement to Thomas Frank. But in the end, he heard, from what I've heard, he heard that he wasn't going to get that job. And as a result, he wanted to join Thomas Frank at Tottenham. And as a result, he will be our assistant coach. Okay, guys, before I get into the comments and start talking about some of the other stuff that has come out from Frank's appointment, I've had so much support from you guys since my video yesterday, where I talked about how I've been nominated for some awards in Spurs Kings Tottenham YouTube Content Creators Awards. If you haven't given me a vote and you would like to, please do go to the link that's in the description box, and it's just a literal kind of box ticking exercise, and you can vote for me if you like my content. So go down to the description box below this in YouTube, and it's also in the podcast platform description box as well. Click on the link and then give me a vote in the categories that I'm nominated for. I'm nominated in Best Breakthrough Tottenham Content Creator. I know I'm nominated in the Watch Along category, which I do for Chris Cowlin's podcast, Chris Cowlin's YouTube channel, and a couple more. So I would love your support. Thank you so much. All right. So Ren in the comments says, "Hi Barnaby, what did you make of QT Romero's Instagram post? Personally, I don't buy the argument that he wanted to stay if Ange was here. He's used multiple reasons to leave and clearly wants out." Okay, so this is an interesting story. Clearly, I did a TikTok video about this morning, actually. I've just released it. But clearly, Christian Romero has had in his Instagram drafts or his agents have had in their Instagram drafts his thank you message to Ange Postecoglou for over a week now, or for a week, because Ange was sacked a week ago. And he has waited until the exact moment, pretty much, that Tottenham announced their new manager to release it. And I have actually got the copy. He said this: Ange, thank you for these 2 incredible seasons. You're a fantastic coach, but above all, a great person who deserves the best. From day one, you paved the way despite the many obstacles that always existed and always will exist. Beyond everything, we won a trophy and went down in the history of this beautiful club, which is the only thing that matters. I wish you the best because you deserve the best, and thank you for everything. So Seren Hogue asked me, what do I think of that Instagram post? I think it's strategic. I think it's pretty cynical. And I think it is an incredibly thinly veiled dig at Daniel Levy and the board. Don't forget, kind of halfway through this season, Christian Romero released some posts basically saying that the club needed to pull their finger out and spend more money on ready-made players. And I think this is another thinly veiled dig at Daniel Levy, particularly the words, you paved the way despite the many obstacles that always existed and always will exist. So Seren says, Christian Romero obviously wants to leave. Now, I will say this, Fabrizio Romano has come out today and said on Christian Romero, it's a quiet situation now. I think Tottenham will really try their best to keep him at least for this season. I think the fact that we have Champions League football does give Spurs a bit more collateral in these conversations with Christian Romero. I do think Thomas Frank will try and have a conversation with Christian Romero to try and gauge whether, how willing he might be to stay or how much he's already made a decision that he wants to leave. But what it will come down to, as I've said in many, many videos, is will Atletico Madrid or Real Madrid, who, don't forget, Real Madrid have already spent £50 million on Dean Howson this summer as a centre-back, will either of them get up to the transfer fee that Daniel Levy would accept? And Christian Romero is a World Cup winner. He's a twice Copa America winner. He's a Europa League winner. You do not get centre-backs like that who have 2 years left on their contracts for cheap. And I've seen numbers, around like 60 million. I don't think 60 million pounds, and certainly not 60 million euros, is going to be enough. And listen, I think what I love about all the kind of research I've done on Thomas Frank is he has this kind of, no dickheads policy. He wants the dressing room to be totally as one. So if he gets the sense that Romero is just not up for it, I think he will say to Daniel Levy, just get rid of him. And I think another thing that I really like from what I've looked on with Thomas Frank is, he will clearly change the way of playing based on who we're playing against. And that means for me, there will be times where we play a 3 at the back and a slightly lower to mid block than we have done under Ange in the league. And that, I think, will play into the hands of defenders who are good kind of box defenders, but maybe not brilliant on the ball. And I'm talking specifically of the likes of Kevin Danso. I think he will flourish under Thomas Frank. And I think Radu Dragusin might be able to show his best qualities under Thomas Frank as well. Now, I saw a tweet from Nathan from the Extra Inch, who's brilliant. He's their tactics guy. And he talked about how he wanted Radu Dragusin to be sold. Now, not only, has Radu Dragusin done an ACL, so you can't really sell someone when they're injured with that kind of injury, but also I put to Nathan, I said, do you not think that there's a chance that Radu Dragusin might play his best football under Thomas Frank when there are going to be times where we're more pragmatic? And Nathan said no, he disagreed with that. But I feel quite strongly that we might see a lot more of Radu Dragusin playing his best stuff. And he might become quite a charismatic leader under Thomas Frank. That's just my opinion. I could be completely wrong, but there will be times for sure where we play a 3 at the back. And I think the likes of Danso and Frank, and then obviously I think Mickey van der Ven should and will be basically made the absolute front and center of that defensive line going forward. I think he can become our Virgil van Dijk. I really do. He's still so young. Virgil van Dijk was a lot older than Mickey van der Ven and had a lot more experience when he moved from Southampton to Liverpool. So I think we could watch Mickey van der Ven really come into his own. I'll just go through some of the other things that were coming out kind of yesterday. Obviously, like I said, they've announced who the staff members are, but there were kind of back and forth. So there was at some point a suggestion that Klaus Norgard would be expected to be a part of Thomas Frank's staff, and fitness coach Tom Perryman might have made the move from Brentford to Spurs. And also some suggestions that Tottenham Academy coach Stuart Lewis could be part of Frank's staff. That was to Alistair Gold. So I'm basically telling you this because I think there will still be moves and things that happen. Matt Wells and Rob Birch obviously were not amongst the members of the coaching staff who were dismissed, as they were at the club before Ange Postecoglou arrived. So it still remains to be seen whether they will be part of Thomas Frank's coaching staff as well. Okay, let's get back into the comments. Lots of you commenting. Thank you so much for your support, guys. Scribble Scrabble says, morning, Barnaby. Please tell me there's some transfer news on the Tottenham front. I'm dying. Well, I'm hopeful that there will be now a bit of a beef up in terms of Tottenham making some moves in the transfer market. They've got their ducks in a row. I'm imagining the next kind of news that we'll hear out of Spurs. I'm actually, the next kind of major news I imagine we'll hear is kind of Scott Munn's departure. But I'm kind of hopeful that by doing a live at 9:30 this morning, that actually whilst I'm doing this live, that maybe Tottenham will release some more news on Thomas Frank's arrival, and maybe they'll release the interview. They always do a kind of sit-down interview with the new manager, don't they? And I would imagine that will have been shot yesterday, or at a push, maybe it'll be shot this morning. But once all that is done and he's properly got his feet under the table, then I would expect him and Johan Lange, and of course, we're still waiting for news as to whether Don Fabio Paratici will come back in July when his ban for being a criminal ends. But you know that they're doing stuff behind the scenes, and hopefully there's a lot of talk, and I'll go into this later in this episode. There's a lot of talk of rumours of Frank wanting to raid Brentford for some of their players, Brian and Mbeumo being one. So let's see what happens on that front. From everything I've read and heard, the relationship between Spurs and Brentford is very amicable. And so, I said in video yesterday that I would be surprised if Brentford allowed us to come in for any of their players, but maybe if they see the money is good enough, they will. Okay. And Kubernetes Enjoyer, a kind of similar question, says, I wonder how long now until they actually do something with transfers. I have a bad feeling about our speed compared with the rest of the market. Yeah, I mean, I've said it in a few videos. I do feel like the other clubs, our peers, are able to get a little bit of a, get ahead of us because they haven't had to deal with a managerial issue. But that's just the way football goes, I guess. Guys, thank you so much for your support. Over 100 and nearly 150 of you watching at the moment. Thank you so much. Please, if you haven't already, press that like button. The more likes we get on YouTube, the more Spurs fans will see this in their suggested videos. So please do give us a like. William Cumberbatch says, boy, I was just wishing we'd got him since last November. I'm happy and excited, and I wonder if a striker like Tony or Mbeumo could join him. So Williams, thank you so much for your message. Listen, I see what you're saying about, wish we'd got him last November, but the reality is I do think that by hook or by crook, we won the Europa League because of Ange Postecoglou. He was the man that in the latter knockout stages was able to make that stylistic change. And what I do think Ange has over and above most managers, almost like Alex Ferguson-esque, is this amazing kind of ability to drag the best out of people in the big matches when it really matters, that kind of motivational quality. And I think Ange got us over the line in that final. Now, I'm not saying that Thomas Frank cannot, I think we will improve in the league under Thomas Frank, undoubtedly, but it will be interesting. He doesn't have the best cup record at all, to be honest. But playing devil's advocate to that, maybe you'd say, but at Brentford, the cups, because of their low wage bill and small squad, the cups had to be low priority compared to staying in the Premier League. So hopefully with a stronger squad at Spurs, he will prioritize the cups, because he's not an idiot, Thomas Frank. He will have come in and seen that one of the big issues he has is Spurs have now broken their trophy duck, and he's going to need to go close or win trophies as well. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how much he improves in the league. Otherwise, he will go the same way as Pochettino in the end, who obviously did incredible stuff in the league and had us playing beautiful football, but never got over the line in terms of trophies. Well, now we've broken that duck. I think it is going to be important for Thomas Frank to build on that in terms of trophies. Sorry, I'm looking away. I'm just checking whether any reports have come in of new news coming in through Tottenham Hotspur. In the comments, Di says, I won't be fooled by Frank's long hair and funny accent, no matter how much Jay Harris Brown noses his buddy. Okay, so Di, you don't seem to be very positive about Thomas Frank. Let me know in the comments who you wanted instead then. Glenn Sparks says, seems obvious Romero wants out, but strange he quotes this beautiful club. Yeah, I'll have to say, I was, as soon as I heard him quote this beautiful club, I was like, oh, he loves us. Yeah, a bit of a kind of shit sandwich from Christian Romero there, wasn't it? But like I said, I think what it'll come down to, I saw somebody tweet, when Nuno came in and when Conte came in. No, when Nuno came in and when Ange came in, the first things they were hit with was like a Harry Kane wanting to leave, and now it's the same for Thomas Frank with Christian Romero. Why our club never changes, etc., etc. But I don't think it's as bad as that. I don't think Romero. I'd be surprised anyway. I don't think Romero will kind of down tools and not turn up to preseason training. I think the Champions League will mean he will be professional. But once again, like I said, I just don't think those clubs who are supposedly interested in Christian Romero will bid the money that it'll take this summer. Now, next summer, with a year left on his deal, I think that is when kind of 60 million euros or 50 million quid or maybe 40 million quid, that is then an offer that I think Daniel Levy would have to accept, but not this summer. Both Hatmundo and Scribble Scrabble saying they voted for me and Chris in the YouTube awards. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Like I said, if you want to give me a vote in these Spurs Content YouTube awards, details are on a link in the description box. Please do give me a vote. Really appreciate it. Never won anything for this channel. I've rarely won anything in my life, really. I did win a British media award for a YouTube channel I used to run called The Football Republic. And it wasn't just me winning it. Obviously, the whole team won it, but that was 10 years ago. So let's try and win some awards. Let's keep the trophy lift going from the Europa League through to the Spurs Content Awards. Simon Cohen says, morning, Barnaby. Great shows as always. Well done. Thank you, mate. Thank you for watching. What else have we got? L. Jones says, yes, I think they'll send Romero away, but Levy will hold him to ransom over selling price to make him sweat a bit. I don't know. Listen, we haven't been a good selling club in the last, not since the kind of mid to early Pochettino days. Back in those days, we were an incredible selling club. Can you remember the amount of money we got for players like Kevin Wimmer? Who was only ever a 6 out of 10 for us at best. We ended up getting, I think, 12 to 15 million pounds from Stoke for him. And we obviously sold a lot of those academy graduates who came through. We got good money for Andros Townsend, for Jake Livermore, those kinds of players. And we were a good selling club then, but it all kind of stopped when we got good under Pochettino. And Daniel Levy kept kind of re-signing players up to long contracts. And as a result, well, not just as a result of that, but also when clubs came in and bidded for those players, like I remember, I think Man United wanted to bid 50 million pounds or something for Eric Dyer. And we didn't want to sell him, so we didn't. And Danny Rose could have gone, I think, for 50 million pounds as well to Man City when Kyle Walker went, but we didn't want to sell them both at the same time. And we came a bit kind of stuck in the rut of we can't sell our best players. Daniel Levy basically didn't want to risk the wrath of the Spurs fans by selling our kind of crown jewels. But there is an argument to say there are times where you have to sell to then reinvest. And we haven't been able to do that. And I do think there is a chance that if Thomas Frank gets, like I said, if he gets an idea from Christian Romero that he's not fully committed, then he might say, all right, sell him and we'll reinvest the 70 million pounds. And that may not be the worst thing for Spurs. I mean, in reality with Christian Romero, and he's the big news story alongside Thomas Frank today because of that post he put. He doesn't, or he hasn't previously, certainly not in the last couple of years, got on the pitch nearly enough. He gets injured too much, and then he always comes back when the Argentina games are on, and then he goes and gets injured again. And in reality, Thomas Frank, I'm very hopeful that our injury issues will ease under Thomas Frank. Certainly his injury record at Brentford was a lot better than Ange's was at Spurs. But I think the only way we should have Christian Romero properly playing for Spurs under Thomas Frank is if Thomas Frank says to him, look, mate, I want to make you captain. I want you to lead us to absolute glory, and actually make him properly inspired and committed to the club and make him sign a new contract. In that instance, I've said it in a video, I got pelters for this, but I think Christian Romero could be an incredible captain for Tottenham Hotspur. If you gave him that responsibility and said, this is the same responsibility as you feel when you play for Argentina, and you could be the player who drags us across the line to something huge. Now, that is an option that I wonder if Thomas Frank will try and pitch to Christian Romero. That is certainly what I would do. Blagavest says, let Romero go away. He won't miss much. Too many times he was poor. He did lack concentration, certainly at the beginning of this season. I felt like he played a lot of games and he was tired and made some mistakes. So I understand that. Ruger Instruction says, Czech beer or English beer? Well, Czech beer is clearly nicer than English beer. What English beer is good? I mean, other than kind of neck oil, the Beavertown. I like the Beavertown beer because I've drunk it a lot since they had their brewery at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, but I'm not really into beer that much, or posh beers or anything like that. Like when I say posh beers, I mean like, name beers, I guess, is what I mean. Oh, apparently, Nico Williams has been given permission to speak to Bayern Munich after they met his release clause. Wow, imagine, as if Bayern Munich don't have enough wide forwards already. Imagine Nico Williams sending in bombs for Harry Kane to finish. Bayern are a big, big club. That'll give them a great chance of winning the Champions League. I have to say, I would love Harry Kane to win the Champions League at Bayern and then maybe come back to Spurs after that. PKD81 says, show Romero the door. He'll spend the entire season prioritizing the 26 World Cup and putting in subpar performances in the league. That is a good point. There is a chance of that. Brian Marcus says, if Romero wants to leave, so be it. It might be a blessing in disguise for the club. Keep Dragishin, please. Neil Shafton says they should have a trophy for the fans that show the most mood changes and multi-personalities named the Sybil, which stands for Happy, Sad, Dickhead, the Levy, and the best impression fooling our management. All right, thanks for your message, mate. I don't fully understand it, but thank you. Nick in Hong Kong says, please solve the persistent injury problems, Thomas Frank. Yeah, I think that will be a huge thing. And Ian Ban says, I watched the new manager presentation. Brilliant work. More of that type, please. Yeah, I think you're mentioning there the Thomas Frank documentary that I released last night when he was announced. I said at the top of the show, but for anyone who wasn't here at the top, basically my frustration is that Tottenham, for some reason, when everybody in the content world knows that the best times to release big announcements or videos for Traction are kind of first thing in the morning or just after work time, like 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. But for some reason, Thomas Frank was announced at 8:15 p.m. last night, and I was out doing a stand-up gig, and I'd like promised all of you guys who regularly watch my channel, I promised that as soon as he's announced, I'll be able to do a video, but I just couldn't. So I'd made a documentary on Thomas Frank and why I think he'll be a great manager for Spurs, and I was able to release that. So do check that out after this live video. Just some other stuff that came in last night. Christian Eriksen was asked about Spurs appointing Thomas Frank. He said, I think he's the right coach for Tottenham. I've had Thomas at various times, and I think he's the perfect match for Spurs, and it would be great when he takes on that challenge. His personality, his way of playing, and his way of being. And the club, considering where they were last season, they did win a trophy, of course, but they're in the process of building something up. I'm sure that Thomas is a good man to bring in. So not surprisingly, smart, well thought out comments from Christian Eriksen. And I did see a tweet, I don't know how much truth there is, with a quote where Eriksen was asked whether Thomas Frank had asked him to come to Spurs with him. And Eriksen said, no, nothing on that, but Thomas could give me a call. I don't know how much truth there is to that. There has also been a report this morning that I saw, and I don't know how much truth there is to it, that Kyle Walker, Tottenham might be looking at bringing Kyle Walker back in. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if Thomas Frank was looking at trying to bring some leadership into the squad and some experience. So that's where you could kind of make some sense of the likes of bringing back Walker or Eriksen. I mean, for me, Christian Eriksen, I've been saying for a while, and I get pelters for this regularly, I think would be a perfect backup number 10 to James Maddison. Now, a lot of you are immediately going to say he was rubbish at Man United, but I've been saying this to my Man United supporting fans for ages, for years, in fact. Why did they keep playing Christian Eriksen as a number 6? They played him in like the CDM position and asked him to be like the quarterback from there, when Christian Eriksen is a maestro number 10. And I still think, I mean, it was only 18 months, 2 years ago, maybe a bit longer, that Eriksen came back to English football, the Premier League, with Brentford under Thomas Frank. And Thomas Frank played him in the 10 and let everything go through him, and he was majestic. And that's how he got his move to Manchester United. Now, for me, yes, Eriksen, his legs aren't what they were, but he was never a quick player anyway. It was all in his head. And if you have him as a squad backup to James Maddison, I still think he could do absolute bits in the 10 at Spurs. I just would never want him to be played deep. That's just not his game. I guess the only question mark against him I would have is, has Eriksen still got the stamina at his age to put in the amount of running and pressing that he used to do? Maybe not. But he used to, and he was very underrated by Spurs fans. Maybe not while he was at his best at Spurs, but I think the way that he, in the last year of his contract, he ran it down really upset a lot of Spurs fans. It didn't upset me, to be honest, because I thought he deserved it. We were so lucky to get him when we got him. He was a brilliant, brilliant player, and he deserved to run down his contract if that was what he wanted to do, which he clearly did. And it hasn't stopped me remembering how brilliant he was. So if he was brought back in as a kind of squad player, I would not hate that whatsoever. But for some reason, it feels unlikely. Now, in terms of Kyle Walker, I'm very much less keen on that. Firstly, I'll say it's based on the fact that his form for Manchester City over the last year, 18 months, if you talk to City fans, just dropped off a cliff. And clearly he didn't regain that form at AC Milan because they haven't chosen to take up an option to buy him after his loan spell. He made a mistake for England the other night. I have no idea why Thomas Frank is picking him for England. And that is all, that's reasons enough on the pitch. Now, if you add in Kyle Walker's stuff off the pitch, that's where, for me, it becomes a proper issue. He's in the tabloids far too much. He's got about 4 different families, kids absolutely everywhere. And it's not for me to judge, but I just don't want a player at Spurs, especially one who will command huge wages, who's going to be in the tabloids all the time and who opposition fans are going to sing dodgy chants about. So that's why that, for me, shouldn't be a goer, the Kyle Walker one. But like I said, when I started talking about this topic, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Thomas Frank did look to bring in a bit of experience to kind of bring up some of these young, exciting players and help them out. Ashley says, Frank plays players in their best positions and to their strengths. There will be a lot less mistakes, which made our players look silly. Yeah, listen, square pegs, square holes, round pegs, round holes, whichever way you want to look at it, always tends to work. And Thomas Frank does seem to be like a pretty smart manager. But for me, once again, I'll say it, I've said it many times, but the reason Ange lost his job is because of the injuries. And the reason I think we got the injuries, as has been proven by the injuries Ange got at his previous clubs, is because of the intensity that he insists his players work at, both in training and in the matches. Thomas Frank will not get injuries to the same degree, in my opinion, as Ange Postecoglou. And I'll say this about Ange. Ange would suit a job like Manchester City down to the ground, a club where they have 25 players who are all of absolute top level. So when you do get injuries, you're just able to replace them with a kind of like for like. But at Tottenham, when he got the injuries to the 2 best centre halves at the club, it wasn't like for like, because Archie Gray had to come in and play, an 18-year-old who'd never played centre-back before in his life, and he ended up playing about 20 games there. So I'm not saying Ange will get a job at Man City, but I do think he will get a job in a league where he will get one of the biggest clubs, and it will suit him down to the ground, because compared to everybody else in those leagues, when they get injuries, he'll be able to replace them with players better than the other teams in the league. That's why it worked at Celtic, and that's why I think he'll get a job at maybe like a Sporting or a Benfica, or hopefully like an Ajax, somewhere like that, in a big club. And hopefully we will face Ange Postecoglou somewhere in the next few years at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in the Champions League. Coolidge says Mbeumo is overrated. Well, there has been some talk that Tottenham are looking to hijack the Mbeumo deal to Manchester United. I mean, if it was going to happen, you'd think the fact that we've got the manager that has made the best out of Mbeumo's career will help. But some players, I mean, you saw it this week with Matheus Cunha. He really, in his Manchester United announcement, talked about how it's always been his dream to play for Manchester United, how when he was growing up in Brazil, Man United were his favourite club. So sometimes you just can't fight against big clubs like that, because not only do they pay more wages, but there's like a heritage, tradition, and kind of dream aspect for these players. Coolidge, though, says Mbeumo's overrated. I don't know. I think he's turned into an excellent finisher. I've always been impressed by how both him and Wissa have ran the lines and got down the channels for Brentford. So he's a good, proven Premier League player. So let's see what happens. Sean M says, for me, it's like Poch, a manager that needed a chance at a so-called bigger club. Yeah, I talked about this in my documentary. I've talked about it in videos. I do sense a little bit of a Pochettino vibe about the Thomas Frank appointment. And I think one thing we've got to remember is that Pochettino didn't hit the ground running massively. I mean, he did win his first game away at Upton Park, which was brilliant. Eric Dyer last-minute goal. That was fantastic. But there was a time in that first season where we had our doubts, and I think we're going to have to ride some waves with Thomas Frank. There'll be some ups and downs, of course there will, but I think it is a good appointment, and he will need a bit of time. And hopefully, as the young, exciting talent, think about it. Bergvall, Gray, Matthias Tell's going to come in. Wilson Odobert, just named but 4, but you still got Mickey van der Ven, who's incredibly young as well. And then topping that off with the likes of Pedro Porro's only in his mid-20s. Destiny Udogi's still in his early 20s. We've got real players with youth and excitement and promise that I think Thomas Frank will get the most of over the next few years. We just have to allow Thomas Frank to have those few years. Carl Hussey says, Barnaby, Romero made a statement recently that his family was not happy in the UK. Family come first. Thanks, Romero, for your service. Off you go. Yeah, but someone's going to have to pay, basically. I'll keep saying that. James Carr says, "How will you know whether the change of manager was a success? What gives Frank a pass mark?" I think, in some ways, really good question. Thank you, James. I think in some ways, if you take away the Europa League win, Frank is in a really good position, because I think the only way is up for Tottenham realistically when you finish 17th, and that should give him a bit more time. I just think he's going to have to really remember that we will be hungry still to add to our silverware now. So I don't think he can just, like he has had to at Brentford, kind of throw away the League Cup, for instance. I think he's going to have to try and put good teams out. But once again, because we're in Europe, we won't go into the League Cup till the third round. So that doesn't, at least we don't have to play like a two-legged first round, or sorry, no, it's not two-legged anymore in the second round. But we'll get a bye through that second round. I'd love us to get another trophy or go close to another trophy. I think we can surprise people in the Champions League. I don't, lots of people saying they think we'll get absolutely battered. I don't think that at all. Frankfurt will be in the Champions League, and people will struggle against Frankfurt, and we turn Frankfurt over two legs. So I think we will be. I personally think, there'll be some ups and downs, but we'll be challenging for that top six, probably. Realistically, fifth will be Champions League, and I think it's very possible Spurs could get fifth. A lot will ride on how the other clubs will do. How much will Manchester United improve? Chelsea are obviously going again, just trying to hoover up every young player, which could work either way. It could again become a bit of a laughing stock that they've got too many players and can't fit in the dressing room, or it could really, they could push on again under Enzo Maresca. Aston Villa obviously failed at the last hurdle to get in the Champions League, but they will be in the Europa League, so they'll have that Thursday, Sunday. That could affect them in the same way that it affected Spurs. I do think, it cannot be overstated how much of a difference there is with the Champions League Tuesday to Saturday, or Tuesday to Sunday, or Wednesday to Saturday, Wednesday to Sunday, to that Thursday, Sunday, where it's always Thursday, Sunday in the Europa League. So I don't think that can be overstated, the difference there, and that will help Spurs, and it will affect Aston Villa. Newcastle in the Champions League, they will go again. They're looking to make signings, but they have PSR issues, as do Aston Villa. So I think, will be in that mix as long as we give Thomas Frank time to get the players understanding. Bear this in mind, Spurs have basically only played one formation for 2 years now. And Thomas Frank is going to come in and say, we're going to need to train 2 or 3 different formations so that we can change things mid-game depending on what's happening, or pre-game depending on who we're playing against. So it's going to take a while for the Tottenham players to understand that. We can see that based on when Ange went to 3 at the back away at Everton, and we were 3-0 down at half-time because the players just did not have a clue what was going on. So it's going to take a bit of time, but I'm confident that we can be pushing for that top 6. Gregsolent, thanks for your comments. It's glad we got Frank, and a bit less nervous now. A lot of his coaching staff are confirmed, as I believe Moneyball managers rely on their backroom, and Brentford like using the conveyor belt method. Yep, I think that's a really good point. The only slight, just playing devil's advocate a bit, is obviously it's kind of similar to what Chelsea tried to do, where they got Graham Potter from Brighton, poached all of his backroom staff. They also poached kind of the men upstairs, the 2 sporting directors as well. And it's taken a long time for Chelsea to kind of finally get to a place where their fans are kind of starting to understand what's going on with them. So I don't think it'll be a simple transition, but we've got to be positive and try and keep with it. Just some news on Luka Vuskovic, who is obviously the Tottenham player who comes in this summer, having been on loan at Westerlo last year, the Croatian centre-half. He just made his debut for the Croatian national team last week as well. His manager at his former club has given some quotes about him. He said, "I've known Luka practically since birth, and he has a specific character. He has great leadership qualities. He was a leader in the Hajduk Split Juniors and is 3 years younger than all his teammates. You have to have the courage to impose yourself as a leader. I talked to a lot of scouts from big clubs when he was leaving Hajduk. They said that this leadership trait cannot be learned. You have to be born with it. As for his playing qualities, he has incredible technique, excellent with both feet, reacts in a completely different way than other defenders in some situations where he doesn't take risks. You can see his total security and control of all those situations. He also has a good feeling for the goal. He's the future of Croatian football. He is a miracle." And that is a centre-half who will be coming in this summer. And listen, this is a good example, I think, of where if he impresses Thomas Frank in pre-season, Thomas Frank will play him. I don't think Thomas Frank will be afraid to play him because he's 19 years old. And if he is the Rolls Royce that some people say he is, then imagine how he could fit in alongside Mickey van der Ven and or Romero if he stays at the club. Listen, it's a big ask because he's also never played Premier League football. He's a young boy. He'll be moving to another country, and there are some question marks about his pace. But there are plenty of defenders who have done brilliantly in the Premier League who do not have amazing pace. Vidic, Terry, just to name but two. Christian Romero, not blessed with pace or height, but his reading of the game is everything. And if Luka Vuskovic can read the game the way that some of his ex-coaches say he can, then there is every chance that he could push for the first team this year, and that's pretty exciting. Let's see what else you're saying in the comments. James Gaffney says, Romero is just trying to upset Levy to help him move, but Levy will just up his valuation of him in response. Lol, maybe. Sean M says, the irony of Dyer winning a trophy at Bayern and the big one at that. Yeah, but no, Dyer only won the Bundesliga at Bayern, and now he's moved to AS Monaco. Eric Dyer, I mean, he got so many pelters at Spurs, but he's clearly a great professional and a really excellent player. Tottenham fans somehow they struggle to see what's right in front of them. The reason Eric Dyer's form dropped off is because Tottenham started flip-flapping from one manager to another and, just not knowing exactly what they were. And Dyer had to play, 4 different styles. But he's had a great career, Eric Dyer, and he'll do well in Monaco. Ben Yosen says Romero can commit or leave. Yeah, or I think we can keep him one more year. Like, he's got 2 on his contract. We're not under pressure to sell him this summer at all, I don't think. Simon Wood says, apparently Frank has come out and said, Spurs fans, I always finish 9th in my 7th season. Yeah, that's funny. That's a good one. Daniel Baldy says, Frank should bring Ericsson back here. Yeah, I talked about that a bit earlier. Matt Smith says, hi, Barnaby. Hope you're well, mate. Hope you're well too, guys. Once again, thank you so much for watching, guys. If you haven't already, please do give this video a like. Over 200 of you watching right now, and got 70 likes. Let's try and get up to 100 likes so that more Spurs fans can see this live stream. Also, had so much support from you guys voting for me in the Tottenham YouTube Content Creator Awards. If you haven't and you like my stuff, please do give me some votes. The link is in the description box. Just click on that link, and then I think I'm nominated maybe 3 or 4 categories. So if you like my stuff, please do give me a vote. Really appreciate it. Simon Wood says, his 9th first season with no trophies a pass grade for Frank under Levy. I don't think so. I think if he came 9th and nowhere near a trophy, I think in reality, even though we finished 17th, I think he would be under pressure from the fans and from Daniel Levy. Bear in mind, we have the 6th and maybe 7th highest wage bill. I think that will probably go up this summer. And so they are the waters in which Thomas Frank will be expected to swim as our manager, in my opinion. Ronnie Wu says, sorry there, Ronnie, I've just lost your comment. Let me go back and find it. Ronnie Wu says, Ange is a gambler. His successes have earned my gratitude. However, if Tottenham persists on this current path, this group of young players may not achieve meaningful development in the near future. Yeah, very well put, Ronnie. I agree. And I think that's, if you go back to the statement, the 2 statements really, the statement that the club released when Ange was relieved of his duties, and the statement that they released last night about Thomas Frank coming in, then I think you can see from those statements that they're basically saying what you're saying there, Ronnie, that we've got a young, exciting group of players that need to be developed and improved, all the while fighting on numerous fronts for silverware and Champions League qualification. And I don't look at Tottenham's squad and think that is a squad for the bottom half of the table. I think it's very much a squad that can challenge the top 6, especially if we can add a couple of players to it, a few young players of the excitement level of Lucas Bergvall, and then a few kind of ready-made players, maybe akin to a Brian Mbeumo, an Eberechi Eza, those kind of players who can fit in, who have played Premier League football before, and who can really take us to the next level. Ashley Goodson, we were discussing earlier, Christian Eriksen perhaps coming back as a squad player. Ashley Goodson says, no to Eriksen. We need to stop buying squad players and instead buy players who walk straight into the 11. We're going to need class to challenge on 4 fronts. I think we need both. I think we need better squad depth as well as players who can walk straight into the 11. That's how I feel about it. And I imagine that Johan Lange, Thomas Frank, and Fabio Paratici probably feel the same. Godfrey says, hi, Barney, I'd like to make us to make an inquiry about Alex Scott and Bournemouth. At Bournemouth, Alex Scott is a Tottenham fan, and he's a very exciting player, but he hasn't played as much as I expected to at Bournemouth since he moved there, I think, from Bristol City. I think he's had some injury issues there. Iraola obviously is a workhorse who gets them sprinting almost as much as Ange did, and so they've had big injury problems as well. So it'll be interesting to see how Alex Scott does at Bournemouth if he can stay injury-free. But he's exciting. Reminds me, he's a bit of a maverick player. Reminds me a bit of a Grealish. Of course, there have been some reports linking Spurs to Grealish as well. I'd be very surprised if that was a deal that happened. But never say never. Just some news coming in now. PSG will not allow Bradley Barcola to leave the summer amid interest from Liverpool and Bayern Munich. He was also on Tottenham's list. So Bradley Barcola will not be coming to Spurs. Simon says Frank was given the time at Brentford he won't get at Spurs. So many force equivalences. Yeah, I think there's the possibility of that, but also look back to Pochettino. Pochettino was given the time after a difficult early run, and then he really pushed on. The difference is, Pochettino's rise and that Tottenham team's rise really came at the same time as Harry Kane's rise, and it's whether Tottenham can have a focal point, a kind of a player who becomes world class at the same time as the rest of the squad growing together, that can be like your focal point. And I wonder whether that could become a Lucas Bergvall. I think Dominic Solanke will score many more goals under Thomas Frank, but whether we'll see him suddenly become like a world-class striker, I'm not sure. But we will get crosses into him, and we will make more chances for him than Ange Postecoglou's teams did, because we were under Ange very kind of single-minded in just trying to get to the byline and cut balls back to the from one wide forward to the other, really, with Dominic Solanke having to almost get out of the way of it. But I do wonder who that player could be, who could grow with this team to become like our world-class leader. My money would be probably on Bergvall if he won. I mean, you've got to bear in mind, Bergvall's what, like 18, 19 years old. He won all 3 of the Tottenham Supporters Club Player of the Year awards in his first season. So imagine the confidence that is going through his veins. Also, I'll say this, Brennan Johnson gets a lot of pelters, but imagine the confidence going through Brennan Johnson's veins now. He scored the winner in a Europa League final. He knows the fans absolutely adore him. I think we will see him go up a few levels this season, maybe want to get on the ball more. Thomas Frank might give him the opportunity to get on the ball more and say to him, come and pick the ball up deeper and run at your man. Do it kind of Gareth Bale. He's not got Bale pace, but he's got the similar kind of style of running where he wants to kick the ball far in front of him and run into the space onto it. Not kind of accelerate-y Aaron Lennon dribbly winger who's got tight, close control and can just beat a man with a little touch. It's like a scampering horse, and he wants to run into the space. And I'm hopeful that Thomas Frank will get onto him and say, listen, you've scored in a Europa League final. The fans absolutely adore you. Now use it. Get on the ball more. Raise your profile. Come up through the hierarchy of the club. And we're giving pelters to a player who scored 20 goals this season. He's a brilliant, elite finisher, and he's a great crosser of the ball as well. That cross across the box in the, in between the keeper and the back line. He's excellent at that as well. So I think some players will start to really improve this season. I'm really hopeful of that. Nick says, looking forward to seeing Spurs do the business in the North London derby with our new manager. Oh yeah, in Hong Kong, yeah, because we played them in a friendly, don't we, in July? And Nick lives out there in Hong Kong. Yeah, that'll be an interesting one, won't it? Spurs actually, it's a good point. Spurs actually have a really difficult pre-season friendly list. We're playing, loads of very difficult clubs, but I think that's probably good for Thomas Frank, to be honest. Games where he can really see who can listen to what he has to say and take it on board, basically. James Gaffney says, if we bring back the old guard for experience for the youngsters, our average age will go from 21 to 81. Lol. I don't think so. Aussie says, Thomas Frank is just leave his nod to the illusion of success. Yeah, obviously there are some very upset Australian fans. I will say this though, I heard a great story. Flav on the Fighting Cock interviewed that guy Vince, I can't remember his surname, but who has written Ange Postecoglou's biographies and is close with Ange Postecoglou. And Vince told this amazing story that in the office where he works at one of the Australian papers, there was a guy who wasn't into Premier League football at all, but because of Ange started supporting Spurs. And then he became such a huge supporter of Tottenham Hotspur. Like, he was so taken in by all of it that by the end, he had gone from not even liking football in the Premier League to supporting Spurs to being Ange out, even though he'd only started supporting Spurs because of Ange in the first place. That is what Tottenham Hotspur can do to you. I just thought that was such an amazing story. Really, I was listening to it in the car and it made me piss myself laughing. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. But yeah, I've really noticed that a lot of people have unsubscribed from my channels, and I think a lot of that is due to the fact that we've lost a lot of Australians. having sacked Ange, and that is a shame. But hopefully, maybe after some time grieving, they'll come back because they felt the bug of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, having watched the journey of Ange whilst he was manager. Simon says Ange has won multiple times with thin squads before Celtic. In Australia, there were the salary cap with Brisbane, and the big squads were Sydney and Melbourne teams. Yeah, okay, fair enough. I can't claim to know a lot about the Australian time, but I just think the Premier League, unfortunately, took its toll, didn't it? The Premier League is a different animal altogether, and the injuries were just ridiculous. Neil Shafton, thanks for your comments. Says, UEFA rules make it difficult to meet the minimums for players in your squad. You need 3 or 4 homegrown and some other rules unique to cup competitions. Yeah, we need homegrown players and we need club-trained players as well. So again, you would expect to see a lot of those youngsters who were on the bench a lot in the Europa League run, the likes of Ajayi, obviously Mikey Moore, and maybe the likes of Alfie Dorrington coming back from loan at Aberdeen. We'll expect to see them in squads a lot this season in the Champions League as well. Cantab says, as with all new managers, the jury is out. To be honest, I can't afford to get too excited. I think you've got to, listen, I can't tell you what to do, Cantab, but you've got to allow yourself to breed positivity when there's a possibility that things could really change. Listen, the reality is, and this is maybe a bit too glass half full, but the reality is, if Thomas Frank overachieves to Tottenham's wage bill in the same way that he did to Brentford's wage bill, by which I mean Brentford's wage bill was the 19th highest in the Premier League. So the second most amount of money spent on wages in the whole league, and he got them into 9th and 10th and 13th. Spurs is the 6th or 7th highest wage bill. If he overachieves the same level, then we'll be pushing the title. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but we're talking about a man, and wages are everything in the Premier League at the elite level. We're talking about a man who properly overachieves compared to the tools that he's given. So I think there is reason to be positive at the possibilities. Guys, let's try and get up to 100 likes. We're on 89. Any of you who haven't pressed that like button, please do. And also, for any of you who are not subscribers to my channel, please do press that subscribe button. I think this will be the last video I do about Thomas Frank's arrival and Ange Postecoglou, and then we're going to go heavy into transfer videos next week. All the Tottenham transfer news every day on videos, and also some wider ranging Premier League transfer news as well. Chris Jays in Kuma says, do you think there'll be a good signing this summer? I'm hopeful for at least kind of one Dominic Solanke level top signing. Maybe that would be an Eza and an Mbeumo, and a dream would be to get 2, to be honest. And maybe the only way we'd get 2 is if we do end up selling Romero and reinvesting that money. Sky Sports Premier League have just done a tweet showing Thomas Frank's preseason matches. So it's Arsenal on July the 31st, Newcastle August the 3rd, then Bayern Munich on August the 7th, and then the Super Cup final against Paris Saint-Germain on August the 13th. What a preseason that will be. Daniel Baldy says, wishful thinking will compete for top 5 or 6. I don't really agree with that, mate, because we were top 5 the year before. So I don't think it's that far. I don't think it's that far off. You're on mute. Says your video on why we should be excited for Thomas Frank was top draw. Every Spurs supporter should watch it. Thanks, guys. If you haven't seen that, it's just a little 10-minute documentary video I released last night called why Thomas Frank can lead us to league glory. Do give it a watch. Yeah, it's just a little just a little background into Thomas Frank and what he is. Light-hearted. But yeah, please do watch it, guys. Really appreciate it. Your support. Simon Wood says, expectation sky high. Oh, I've lost it for a second there. Sorry. Simon says, expectation sky high. Frank will be crucified if he turns out not to be the Messiah. And then Neil answers him, says, Simon, there were 225 to 250,000 fans at that parade. You're a little off. Or maybe you're asking something else. Path, thank you for your comments. Will you take Grealish and Eze if we sell Son? Sonny is someone we have to talk about, actually. Al Hilal have made contact with Son to potentially join them this summer and are ready to pay more than 30 million euros for the Spurs captain. Well, for me, it would have to be a lot more than 30 million euros. He would become basically the face of Saudi Arabian football, as he's the face of Tottenham Hotspur and has been for years. So they would have to pay a lot more than that. If it's only going to be 30 million euros, for me, it's not worth selling him. I think Thomas Frank would really appreciate him as a squad player, maybe even more, maybe a first-team starter. And I just want him to get some rest this summer, really, Son. He's just played so much football. Just sit in South Korea, mate. Put your feet up, and come back to Spurs. The pressure will be off him if he comes back to Spurs. So yeah, unless it was an outrageous bid that we could properly reinvest the money from, I'd be tempted to keep Sonny for the last year of his contract. Lloyd Hughes says keep Grealish away from this team. Yeah, Jack Grealish to me, I've said it a few times. I said it about Sane, I'll say it about Grealish. I don't really want us to buy these players who have already had their big moves, who are on 300 grand a week and will have to take a wage drop. They won't be motivated to play at Spurs. It doesn't really strike me as something that Thomas Frank has done a lot at Brentford, so it would surprise me if we did it here. Cantab asked, Barnaby, would you take Sancho? It's another similar situation. Although he's 25 and clearly a great player, is there a chance Thomas Frank could put his arm around him and get the best out of him? Yes, but, he's already kind of pissed off Man United and Chelsea. Why is he going to be more motivated to come and play at Spurs? I'm just not sure. He does strike me as the kind of player who needs an arm around the shoulder. He seems to always get that when he goes to Dortmund. But I don't know. He's on a lot of wages at Man United, and I'm not sure Spurs would want to match that. And I'm not sure he would want to drop down a level wage-wise. Benyason says, sounds like the fan base is mostly united behind Frank. Don't jump on his back in spite of Levy. Come on, you Spurs. I agree with that. Neil Shafton says, winning that trophy creates excitement with the team and the fans. It was a good experience for the young players who now know what it's going to take to just get to a final for any trophy. Completely agree. They're winners now. The pressure is off their back and they will have enjoyed that feeling of winning, guys. And I think that could potentially lead us to more wins. When we won the 1984 UEFA Cup, Keith Birkinshaw left straight away, and that led the next few years was some of the most exciting in Spurs' history, and we nearly won the league the next season. Now, I'm not saying we're going to do that, although obviously secretly I hope we do. But winning breeds winning, and that's not something that Tottenham players have had for a long time. Just before I go into some more comments, getting into the last few minutes of this stream, guys, there are some reports that Birmingham City and West Brom have registered their interest in signing Mikey Moore, which presumably would be on loan. The West Brom link obviously makes perfect sense because Ryan Mason has gone there as manager. I would like to see Mikey Moore get some game time in the Championship potentially, but I also think it's likely Frank will come in and think he could push first team. So let's see what happens. La Isla Bonita says, Barnaby, if given time and backing, where do you see Frank taking us in terms of where we compete in the Premier League and what we can win? I said it earlier, I'll say it again. I think we can push for top 6 this season. I really do. And potentially get close in a trophy as well. Something like the League Cup, maybe. I would love, love, love us to get to an FA Cup final. We haven't been in an FA Cup final since 1991. I would love it if maybe just for once we can get a good draw or not go out to a ridiculous Championship team like we lost away at Middlesbrough, lost at home to Norwich one year. I would love us to go on a proper run, get to the FA Cup final and win the FA Cup. That would be amazing. Carl Batty says, we don't need that Man City misfit. He's nothing more than an overrated ego. He's not a Frank type player. I think we were talking about Carl Walker earlier. I think that's probably what you're talking about. Let me see. What else have we got here? Glenn Svark says, really hoping to see Eze in a Spurs shirt. Yeah, I think we all are. But I do fear they're probably going to be teams with more money and wages to spend than Spurs on Eze. He is with, I think he's with CAA base, which a lot of the Spurs players are. So there is a link there. But I don't know. I don't know. Eddie says, I'd like a more reliable keeper. I've been thinking about the keeper role. It'll be interesting to see. It's a real opportunity for Kinski, isn't it? With a new manager coming in. They'll start from scratch. I've said it many times. He's not as good a shot stopper at the moment, Kinski, as Vicario, but he's better at pretty much everything else, commanding his box, his distribution. It'll be interesting to see whether Frank is tempted to play the youngster to build up play a bit better. It'll be really interesting. Sam Williams says, can you let me know what clubs you're doing stand-up in this weekend, as I love it in London, would like to avoid them. Haha. He says, that was my stand-up, joking. I don't think it's stand-up unless you're actually on the stage in front of a comedy crowd, mate. But yes, well done. Good joke. All right, guys. So thank you so much for watching this live stream. So gutted I wasn't able to do it last night when the news came out, and there would have no doubt been so many more of us watching. But I was out gigging, and that's annoying, and I blame Spurs for that. But thank you for your support. Once again, if you haven't, I'd really appreciate your support voting for me if you like my stuff for the Tottenham YouTube Content Creator Awards. The link is in the description box below. I think I'm nominated for 3 or 4 awards. So do give me a nomination and spread the word to anyone else who you know who loves Spurs and loves my stuff. And yeah, listen, guys, it's Friday the 13th, no less. We have a new manager. We have some positivity. Enjoy your weekend, guys, and I will be back with more videos next week. In the meanwhile, I'll still be making videos across TikTok and the Instagram Reels, so do come and check me out there. The handles are in the description box, but it's at Barnaby Slater or at Barnaby Slater Comedy. Enjoy your weekends, guys, and of course, come on, you Spurs.